Have I got a story for you? Lizbeth and I attended the same Bradley childbirth education course over 9 years ago. So I can say with certainty that she was as prepared for birth and baby feeding as any person can be without having been through it. Yet, as with all things in life, just because a person prepares does not mean they will not face challenges. As you listen, think of the challenges you have faced. Were you believed when you shared your challenge? As a provider, how do you show someone you understand their worry, even if your understanding of their challenge causes you to worry less? How about, as friends, providers, and family members, let's do a better job validating what postpartum women are saying is happening to them. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding experiences through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your breastfeeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
My name is Lizbeth. I am married to my husband, Mike. We have been together for 24 years, and we've been married for 17 of those. And we have one daughter, Gianna. She is 8. She'll be 9 at the end of October.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So, what was your exposure to breastfeeding before you had Gianna?
It was something that I wanted to do. I knew it was something I'd wanted to do. I had friends who had done it. It just, to me, it made sense to me. Um, I was into, to a certain extent, I was into the natural childbirth, the natural, obviously that's a big part of why I joined the Bradley classes. Um, and then it was watching people around me, like watching Janet and seeing this little guy just, okay, I just need a little comfort, or I just need a little bit. And he's walking around and doing all these things, but it was a way of that they had of communicating with each other that really was quite beautiful to me.
Yes, and Janet was our childbirth education instructor.
Yes.
And I didn't know it at the time, but she was one of my early influences as well, because we met in
Mhm.
her home and her two kids were there. They're now teenagers, but
Oh my
her two
gosh.
kids were there, and her youngest was a toddler.
Mhm.
And he was breastfeeding, and we got to see him breastfeeding up close and personal.
It was also, so much of it was about, well, you can breastfeed, but only when if they can ask for it, you should just stop, except for that they ask for it from the time they're born. They just have different ways, and you must be, covered in a tarp. And so it was an unusual experience for me to just see. He would want a little bit of milk, he'd go up to mom, and then he'd be off doing whatever he was going to do next. And it's like, well, this isn't disgusting. This isn't immodest. It's something they do together. It's a way they communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Any other exposures that you had to breastfeeding before it
I
was
mean,
your
my
turn?
my sister-in-laws both did it. I had friends who had done it, and it was just, to me, it was never a big deal. It was just kind of, oh yeah, okay, they're eating. But I do know a lot of it was like, should I leave? Should I leave? And
Mm.
I didn't
Mhm.
feel like that with Janet, and she didn't expect that. And it was just nice to have this, okay, I'm we're just doing this.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you took the Bradley class, and we did discuss breastfeeding. Maybe one full session was devoted to breastfeeding. I can't really
Yes.
remember.
Yes.
Anything else you did to prepare?
Um I read everything I could. We had to read the book from La Leche League. Um, I'd look up different things that I needed to know because I'm very much a research person. So I did research on this natural method of feeding
Yeah.
because that's who I am. Uh,
Hmm. Was there anything that you read along the way that was particularly helpful to you in
I
looking
found
back?
I found La Leche League's book really to be the most. It was normalizing any question you might have had on something that could happen, there was an answer for it. It really got me used to the idea that this wasn't something that I had to do hidden away, that there really needed to be a community around me for this to be successful.
Yeah, this is the womanly art of breastfeeding.
Yes, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, great. A lot of people reference that book. I've noticed in the podcast.
Mhm.
Some people did nothing to prepare, and then people who did do something to prepare, they often will reference that book.
Mhm.
And I remember using it in the early days and weeks and months, going back and just looking up particular topics.
Yes.
Um, yeah, because it was organized by topic, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, Great. Okay. So tell me a little bit about any goals that you had for breastfeeding.
I wanted to breastfeed at least until she was 2. I wanted her to have that immune component that was so important. I work in a school, so I work in I work with an adorable little petri dish. Um, and I wanted her to have that immunity again, so she didn't get sick. So we weren't looking at things like ear infections and things like that. So I wanted to do that up until 2 years. I also knew that she was likely my only child.
Mm-hmm.
So that was going to be that was my shot to have a breastfeeding relationship.
Mm,
I people would talk about the pancake child. The first one never comes out right. It's like this is it. I'm probably not going to be able to have another baby, so here we go.
mm. Did that add extra pressure for you, feeling
Yes,
like you had to do everything right?
yes, yes, it did. I mean, I put enough pressure on myself anyway, so I don't know how much of that was related to it or how much was just that I'm someone who puts a lot of pressure on it. Like, this is the goal. I want to meet that goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that would be extra difficult to feel like. I mean, I, for all of our children, we don't want to mess things up, but to feel like this
Mhm.
is my one and only shot and I won't ever have another experience for both birth and breastfeeding, that would be
Yes. Hmm.
really difficult. Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your birth experience and what impact you think it might have had on breastfeeding.
My to go back a little, I had multiple losses. I had to go under fertility treatments so that I could stay pregnant with Gianna. The entire 39 weeks and 5 days was I did not have a moment where I actually really believed I was going to get to bring her home. And
Mm.
then my water broke at 1:30 on October 25th, and I was holding her by 10:24.
Lizbeth experienced an incredibly quick labor. She used the pain management tools we had learned and practiced in our childbirth education course, and her husband proved to be an incredible support to her as she suffered through back labor for the entire time due to her daughter's position in the birth canal. After a pressure episiotomy and a scare towards the very end, she was finally able to overcome the worries she had endured after so many losses. This is what she had to say about meeting her daughter for the first time.
And as I said earlier, I didn't have a moment of peace during my pregnancy. And my husband standing there goes, "That's her head. Those are her shoulders. That's her body. That's her cry. That's her cry." And they placed her
Mm.
on me, and she wasn't really she's just kind of looking around at everything. And they put her on me, and we were doing some skin to skin for a while, and the nurse is, the doctor is stitching me back up. And I look over at it and I go, why are her limbs blue? And the nurse there
Mm-hmm.
said, oh, that can be extremely normal. As she yanks her off me and said, come on, come on. Apparently, some babies, when they try to nurse at first, they get confused on the whole suck, swallow, breathe. So they get
Mm-hmm.
some of the colostrum and they just hold their breath.
Mm.
But I didn't know that. All I knew was that my child was turning blue and her heart rate went down. And I very much wanted them to fix that and find out what that was about. So for the
Mm-hmm.
first several hours, she had to be in the nursery while they observed
Mm-hmm.
her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm there like, I didn't have an epidural. I didn't have anything like that. So they kind of cleaned me up and said, after that, you can go see your baby. And I'm just there like, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, I want to do that right now. Bring her
Mm-hmm.
to me. So I was all set. I was all ready to go. And I just started walking out in the hospital down the way saying, oh, where's the nursery? How can I get there? And I've got people running after me with the wheelchair, like, you're not supposed to be up and walking around. And it's like, well, I'm okay. Then you're going to have to catch me because I'm going to see my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
after that, though, we did skin to skin. It was either me or my husband, and she actually learned to latch really well.
Mm.
And I and the other piece was that, again, from working with Janet, I knew that the whole don't let her use you as a pacifier thing was nonsense. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime she squirmed or cried, I would just put her to the breast and she'd nurse a little and then fall asleep. And at one point I had a nurse, I was sore, and the nurse like, well, you letting it use her as a pacifier? And I said, comfort nursing is a perfectly valid way to nurse.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than when we throw the pacifier at them, which my daughter was having none of. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, we took her home, and I think that having that very quick labor experience, that things didn't go terribly, and even though after there was that scary part where they had to um, observe her, it was, for me, it was a very gentle experience. It wasn't a painful experience, and I think that helped so that I was able to just focus on, okay, now we get to bond.
Well, the thing I was going to say was small comments like, "Are you letting her use you like a pacifier?"
Mm-hmm.
can do a lot to erode a new breastfeeding person's confidence if you
Mm-hmm.
aren't sure of yourself and
Yes.
sure of what the baby is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I went into that experience knowing that babies do that, and it's a part of what brings in a, a full milk supply. That when
Yes.
they nurse around the clock and use you like a pacifier, I'm using air quotes here,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually part of what creates a full milk supply. But when a nurse or any support person in the hospital flippantly throws that terminology around, and the typically a mother says to herself, "Oh wait, I thought I was doing the right thing. My baby was crying, so I brought my baby to breast, and then she's comforted. Look at me, I'm doing great." And then someone else says, "Oh well, why are you doing that?" That's like a little erosion of
Yeah.
confidence. And
Mm-hmm.
then you go home thinking, should I be doing that? I'm just going to let my baby cry a little bit, or maybe I should give my baby a pacifier. And then 2 months down the line, 3 months down the line, you have a lower milk supply than what satisfies your baby, and you don't understand why. You don't see the through line there.
Mm-hmm. And that the funny thing about that is that same nurse had me the next day, and I was producing milk, not colostrum. I had milk. And she's like, "Oh, your milk came in." It's like, yeah, from letting her use me as a pacifier, lady.
Whether you were preparing to meet your baby or thinking about those moments when you first had the opportunity to get to know your babies, or you are a healthcare professional who has the opportunity to either build up each family's baby feeding self confidence and self efficacy, this point is worth taking a moment to ponder. Were the words that were spoken to you ones that helped you tune in to your baby and help you to learn their individual feeding cues? Did they help you to learn about your baby and feel like you were the one who could understand your baby and learn how to provide what they needed as the parent of your baby? Did the feeding instructions help you understand your body better or just confuse you more? Did you feel heard and understood? If you have the privilege of supporting families during this beautiful time, are the words you speak to them ones that sow seeds of doubt or seeds of empowerment?
What worked for me is that through the 12 weeks, I was able to communicate very effectively with my team. So they were able to understand that it was just kind of like, okay, these are the things that are important to me. It is extremely important to me that, and I don't know why I have to say this, but people have to say this, that you not put your hand in my vagina without explicitly asking me and having me tell you that that is okay. I don't want to have my arms restrained. If I need to have a uh, a C-section and it's not an emergency, can I not have my arms restrained? Part of the reason for my not wanting an epidural was that I needed to be able to move my legs. That control of my body as far as that goes was extremely important to me. And being able to explain those in such a way that was a big part of what Janet and Brian did was having us think about ways we could communicate it so that our care team would hear it. So rather than just coming and saying, nope, no vaginal exams, I don't want you to do that. That's wrong. Do this way, saying, these are my concerns. Can we try this instead?
Yeah. Okay. So your milk came in pretty early, like day 2 or day 3?
Day two.
Day 2. Wow.
Day two.
That is really early. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
early.
It's like, okay, she's crying. It may not be that she's hungry, but let's see what this does.
Besides the initial 4 hours of observation in the nursery and some nipple soreness that Lizbeth was experiencing from nursing, things went smoothly for the rest of her and Gianna's hospital stay, in large part due to their confidence that she could feed and comfort her baby. They went home after 2 days and began their journey of feeding Gianna at home.
Well, I did experience pain at the beginning. And we went to her first visit with the pediatrician, and they have a lactation consultant there. Her name was Nurse Joan, and Nurse Joan was wonderful. And she took a look and said, I see the problem. And she just said, just put your finger on her chin when she goes to latch, and it'll open her mouth just that much more. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this isn't supposed to hurt. This is awesome. And for 2 weeks, it was wonderful. And then I started to notice that my left breast hurt. And it was a spot that it hurt, but it wasn't red. It wasn't, I couldn't feel anything at first. And then I could. So I went in to my doctor and they said, well, you're not running a fever. Maybe it's cellulitis. They gave me an antibiotic. Nothing changed. And it had started to grow more. You could see the redness, and I was in pain all the time. I was taking the max amount of Tylenol and ibuprofen you're allowed to take. Like I was on so much of that just to keep the pain manageable. And my doctor's saying, well, I don't understand. You don't have a fever. I said, well, I'm running 100.5. And she said, oh, well, that's not a fever. And I said, but here's the thing. My general temperature is between 97.3 and 97.8. So it kind of is. And I've been taking I've been taking all these medicines that reduce fever. And she says, okay, yeah, that is a concern. And as palpitating it, she's like, okay, yep, you've got a mass the size of a golf ball there.
Mm.
We're going to put you on this antibiotic. Come see me in a few days. By that time, it was a softball, and it
Mm.
had turned into an abscess. So I had to get in with a surgeon to have it drained.
Again, I will keep beating this drum because it needs to be beat. Can we please trust women when they say they are in pain, when they say something isn't right? Whether it's the latch or saying their nipples hurt or saying they feel something in their breasts. We don't know what would have happened if Lizbeth had received treatment for mastitis before this ductal clog was the size of a softball. But she should not have had to convince a provider that something was really wrong. If you want to hear an episode that fully explains the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine's latest protocol on treating mastitis, this protocol came out in June of 2022. Check out my episode about it. It is episode 32 called Stop Massaging During Mastitis and What to Do Instead. It'll be linked in the show notes. This is also a great resource to share with clients.
Oh, no.
And yeah, so I go in and I get this general surgeon, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's not all that impressive. Yeah, it's just a little bit of, a little bit of an abscess." And it was awful and I felt terrible, but I went home, and all of a sudden my left side just wasn't producing much of anything.
Mm.
And as a result of that, my daughter began to lose weight.
Oh, no.
So I'm in there with the pediatrician, and it was for something unrelated, and they weighed her, and I said, "Wait a minute. That's less than she was last time." And they're like, "Oh, is it?" It's like, "Yes, it is." And they said, "We think that you should supplement with formula." And I burst into tears like it was the worst thing in the world. So, hello, postpartum depression. Um, and that was even, I went to my doctor. I'm like, I don't, how am I supposed to keep this going? She's not able to nurse. Oh my gosh, am I going to have to wean? I don't want to wean. I wanted to continue to nurse. And what I ended up, and then I, for the follow up with that, so we called Janet. We pulled in every resource we could find to figure out, what do I need to do to get my milk supply back. So what I ended up doing is called triple feeding, where I'd nurse her, I would top her off with formula, and then I'd pump. And I would do this around the clock, just trying to get that left breast or the right breast just to be like, okay, yep, this is what we're supposed to do. And then on top of that, I also found a breastfeeding medicine doctor in Connecticut. She
Gail
was over
Smiley.
Dr. Smiley,
Okay.
yes. And I
Mm-hmm.
got an appointment with her. And, because I have like this, there's still a lump there. And I'm talking with the surgeon. I'm saying, why is there still a lump there? And he says to me, well, if you weren't so focused on breastfeeding, you wouldn't even notice. I'm a woman of Ashkenazi Jewish descent who is in her early 30s, and you're trying to tell me that I wouldn't notice or pay attention to a lump in my breast?
Right.
What is wrong with you?
Is he a breast specialist
Oh,
at all?
no,
Oh,
general
see,
surgeon.
just a general surgeon. And when you went into the surgery, was he trying to be cognizant of mammary glands or nerves that might impact
No,
breastfeeding at all? Okay.
not at all.
So he just goes in. Are you under general anesthesia for the?
No, no, I was
Okay,
wide
so,
awake.
so you're wide awake.
Wide awake, and because the infection actually turned out to be community acquired MRSA, and
Oh,
when you try to use Novocaine with MRSA, it's not effective. So I felt everything. I felt the needle go in. I felt it moving around.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
it was, yeah,
So the way that he drains it is with a needle going into the abscess and then sucking out
yep,
the liquid that's
Yeah, it's
been.
called the needle aspiration. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So there was no, he wasn't like cutting into your breast or anything
No.
like that.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay. Um, wow. And so he's being totally dismissive of your experience at breastfeeding an infant,
Oh, yeah.
still feeling something in the same spot.
Yes.
And when you would go to him, he was saying it's no big deal.
He told me I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't breastfeeding. And I looked at him and I said, "Excuse me, sir. I'm a woman. I'm 32 years of age. I'm of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. My grandmother died of breast cancer. Yes, I would notice."
Yeah. That is
And
so wild.
it was. And then I said to him, "So I'm going to be seeing a doctor of a doctor who specializes in this." And he goes, "Oh, like some kind of glorified lactation consultant." And in my
Yes, actually.
feistiness, I said, "She is a pediatrician and she is board certified and she is a fellow of the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine and she's one of 89 in this country." And like I just listed all of the things like, no, you're not going to
Mm,
tell me, oh, it's just this glorified, you're not going to mansplain what's going
right.
on with my body to me. But
Right.
that's me. I know there are a lot of people that would be here, oh, okay, all right, that must be true.
Yeah. And so the abscess, when an abscess occurs, um, it starts out as a plugged duct, but then
Hmm.
becomes infected.
Yep.
And the infection grows.
Hmm.
And the infection, you somehow caught MRSA out in the community.
Hmm.
Were you working at the time?
No.
Or, okay. So you were
Mm-mm.
still home on maternity leave?
I was still home. I was on
Okay.
maternity leave.
Okay. Wow. So it had gone from a plugged duct to mastitis
Hmm.
to MRSA, and it just grew and grew and grew. And so what he was suctioning out was
Hmm.
in like infected gobbledygook.
It was yellow and it
Yeah.
was gross.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you made the appointment with Dr. Smiley, and what did she do?
um, well, the first thing she said is she's like, that shouldn't have dropped your supply. But what she also said to me is, go ahead and supplement with formula that might save your breastfeeding relationship. And I
Mm-hmm.
had never heard that or thought of that before. It was like, to me, it was if they get, you know, a sniff of formula before they're 6 months old, then you're going to have allergies and all of these terrible things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and she just said, no, you can do that. So that's what we did from 6 weeks until she was 3 months.
Yes, yes, yes. Sometimes this is exactly what we need to save the breastfeeding relationship. And this works best when you work with a highly skilled lactation professional who can work with you to create a feeding plan that works for the whole family. I would love to be this person for you. If your baby feeding relationship has been more stressful than not, let me be the one to help you have more joy and less anxiety around feeding your baby. You can reach out to me at low@quabbinbirthservices.com.
I was followed up with Dr. Smiley, and the left side never recovered. It
Mm-hmm.
produced a little, but from 3 months until 8 months when we started introducing food, I exclusively breastfed her with just my right breast
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
through all of the pumping and all of that. I was able to get enough of a milk supply that she was able to get everything she needed from half my body. And Dr. Smiley said, we always hear theoretically that this can happen. She said, but I've never seen this actually happen.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It was a single minded, just, I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hooked up to that pump constantly.
How long did you continue the triple feeds?
It was around 3 months.
3 months of triple feeding
So
through the night and everything?
so it's about 6 weeks of triple feed.
6 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was through the night too?
Oh yeah. The nights where you get the most milk.
Yeah.
I'd get up in the middle of the night and I'd be like, all right, yep, I'd go downstairs, I'd be pumping, and the pump starts to talk to you after a while. And so I always thought it was saying, damn it, damn it, damn it.
I'm going to make an episode of the words people say their pump has said to them, maybe a promotional clip, because you're the third person in the last week that has told me the words your pump has said to you. Yeah, it's
And
true.
at one point, my husband came down and started singing "The Lion Sleeps Tonight" to the breast pump.
Yeah.
And it was like, honey, it is the middle of the night. Please go back up and go to sleep. We don't know when she's going to wake up again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, was it Dr. Smiley who got you on that triple feeding plan to begin with?
No, I'd read about it.
You'd read about it. Okay.
And then Dr. Smiley said, yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Okay. And then you saw her multiple times and she helped you wean off of that plan eventually.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because
was-
triple feeding can be appropriate in some instances, but often when you look on online forums, everybody's like triple feed, but it's not sustainable for the long term.
No. And
Right.
triple feed, to say that it was at great cost to me. It was absolutely exhausting. I didn't really start to feel okay and again, because I'd been infected with MRSA for all that time. It probably took me that entire 6-week period to start to feel human again.
Right. Yeah. And so eventually you were able to wean off the pump, wean off the formula as well.
Well, I weaned off the formula. I continued to pump, again, just to give that breast the idea, but also to build up a stash of milk for her to have. We wanted her to be able to take a bottle. So once a day, my husband would give her one of those bottles, and we're thinking, great, she knows how to take a bottle. When I go back to work, my mom will give her bottles. Well, Mimi was not allowed to give her bottles. She just wasn't having any of that. Mimi, no, I don't want the bottle from you. But if Mimi put it in a little teacup, then, that was okay.
Okay.
She'd dip ginger snaps in them when she'd have tea with her great-grandmother.
Yeah. So she figured out a way, and that's the nice thing about having, not everybody has a family member around to care for their baby, and often in a child care facility, it has to be a bottle.
Yes.
But, when I'm working with a client who's worried about bottle refusal and they do have the privilege of having a family member care for their baby, you can problem solve other ways of feeding the milk. It doesn't have to be from a bottle. And how did you come to feeding with the teacup? Was that Mimi that figured that out?
That was Mimi. Well, she started going with my mother at around 10 months old. I was able, because I'm a teacher, I was able to take the rest of my year off and still have a job to go back to the following fall. And so it was she suddenly figured out, well, maybe if I give her a cup, and she would drink it from the cup, and then really the teacup came out of my grandmother. So her great grandmother would have tea regularly. She would have ginger snaps, and Gianna would kind of in that play, the way that they are starting to kind of play their world around them. She would have tea with memer and ginger snaps, and she'd dip the ginger snap in the milk, just like Meme would.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And so then when you went back to work, you continued to pump on would you always pump on the left side too?
I would pump both sides.
Oh,
the left would give me a little bit, but I mean, it was just kind of those, I used to call it my dessert side. Where it'd be like, okay, she's pretty well. Let's see, does she want anything from there? And she might not.
And when you say a little bit, I know that pumping is different from what she would take from the breast, but when you would pump, would you get any at all?
Sometimes it'd be drops. I
Okay.
A few times, like middle of the night, I could probably get like half an ounce
Okay.
compared to
Hmm.
like 6 on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting in studies when you compare pumping sessions between the right and the left breast.
Hmm.
Most people say their milk output was greater from the right breast. About 65.7%
Okay, I didn't
of
know that.
people say that their milk output is greater from the right breast. Now, your situation is definitely unusual. You know,
Yes.
it's beyond just having more milk from one breast than the other,
Yes.
and it is interesting. I just wonder if the trauma and the stress to that left breast it contributed to producing less milk after that situation. It does not seem like the surgeon treated your psychological state or your physical body with very much care, you
Oh
know.
no. No, none.
Yeah. Yeah, and
None.
I'm so
I was really actually very it was the one appointment my husband didn't go with me,
mm,
and I was so glad he didn't, because if he had been there, I he would have gotten arrested. The way this guy's treating me, he would have my husband's not a violent man, but the way this guy was talking to me would not have been acceptable.
yeah, he may also not have treated you that way,
That's
sadly,
true. I had
if
my
there was a
dad with
man in the
me.
room.
I had my
Oh,
dad with me.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how dismissive medical providers can be
Mhm.
of breastfeeding
Well,
and of the psychological impact that the loss of breastfeeding can have on people.
mhm.
Even if they do have to make a different plan, to be dismissive of the impact it has. If people are saying, yeah, it's fine, I don't mind, like I'm ready to make a different choice, great, go with that. But if people are showing that they are very emotional about this decision, you have to honor those feelings.
Mhm.
Um,
And
and
as far as the my my obstetric group couldn't figure out why I still had this lump feeling, and I'll never forget going in and having Dr. Flagg look at me and say, "Yeah, we need to rule out postpartum breast cancer. I mean, my hair's not on fire about it, but we should probably send you for an ultrasound." And that's just that Dr. Flagg just has very matter of fact, and I didn't take offense to that, but I do know at that moment I was like, "Wait, there's such a thing called postpartum breast cancer?"
right, yeah,
Wait, what?
right, yeah. Talk about stress hormones elevating.
So they did the ultrasound, and they said, no, there's nothing quite like getting a letter from your physician saying you don't have breast cancer. There's
Right.
really nothing quite like that letter. But to give you an idea, this guy's completely dismissive, whereas my other doctors are like, wait a minute, you're 50% Ashkenazi?
Mm-hmm.
We have to we have to really explore this.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And I'm glad that you knew. I actually saw Dr. Smiley too myself. She was amazing, and it's amazing to have a doctor who's also so adept at breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Um, it can be really important, especially because she can bill insurance when a lot of lactation consultants can't.
Mm,
Um, so it's pretty amazing to have that resource in
yeah.
Connecticut.
Mhm.
So you continued to pump while you were at work
Mhm.
on both sides, but you
Yep.
were mostly getting milk from the one side. Were you able to pump enough for her needs while you were at work?
Yeah, and I mean, again, at that point, she'd really started to get this idea that solid foods were fun.
Mm,
She
mm-hmm.
would eat them, so it wasn't so much of a. It was transitioning to solids was a bit difficult because she would clamp her mouth shut, arch her back,
Mm.
screech, until one day we were like, well, let's see. I'll just put it on the spoon and see what she does with it. And she ate it.
Mm.
So it was very much Mama, I'm going to do this myself.
Right. She didn't want you to feed her.
No,
Right.
you don't feed me. I do it.
Right.
Once we figured
Yeah.
that out, she'd try all kinds of things.
Lizbeth pumped for a total of 18 months, gradually weaning from a full-time pumping schedule to only pumping in the morning and at night. As a school psychologist, she was able to create her own pumping schedule and pump in her office while writing reports, and even once while waiting for DCF to pick up the phone. I wanted to know how long she continued to breastfeed.
She was 4.5 when she
Mm-hmm.
was finally ready to give up Nosh.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she called it.
Mm-hmm. Where did Nosh come from?
Well, I think in my sleep deprived thought process, I would be like, "Oh, you want a little Nosh? Okay, have a little Nosh." And then when she was losing the weight and had to so often nurse, it's like, "Okay, you want a Fress? Let's Fress now." And it
Uh-huh.
just got to be called Nosh. She learned we taught her the sign for milk,
Uh-huh.
and she realized that if she did that when she really wanted it, it was both hands.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it just as she got older, she'd refer to it as Nosh.
Yeah.
And she'd
Yeah.
sit on my lap and say, "Mama, Nosh." If she heard a
Uh-huh.
if she heard a baby cry when we were out and about, she'd go, "Baby cry? Mama, give Nosh."
Aw, that's so sweet. And so she was 4.5. Do you remember your last breastfeeding moment, or did it happen so gradually that you don't
Happened so
remember?
gradually. It was just like it suddenly, it wasn't every day. It was a once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just wasn't anymore. And she'd talk about it after. She's like, "I miss Nosh." I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Yeah, honey, sometimes I do too."
Yeah. And you just woke up one day and you realized, oh, she hasn't breastfed in a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like it's anything else. Like I suddenly realized I couldn't lift her anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Or we did the last time I wore her, and just
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm not wearing her anymore. She needs me in different ways now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you're definitely the first person that I have interviewed that had a breast abscess. And I think that's an important thing for people to know about because it's often not the first thing that medical providers think of.
Hmm.
Um, and so sometimes we have to advocate for ourselves. Were you aware that that was a possibility when
Yes.
you? Okay.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
but again, I'd read the books. I knew
mhm,
that piece, and it's like, okay, you've had me on two different antibiotics, and it's still not getting better.
mhm.
And okay, I had mastitis. It's still not getting better. What do we do now?
Right. Yeah. So you
And
continue to advocate for yourself.
yes, and my particular OB wanted to see me every 2 weeks anyway because she wanted to monitor for postpartum depression.
Mm,
So I
mhm.
had appointments every 2 weeks anyway for the first 12 weeks of,
That's amazing. I haven't heard of an OB doing that
yeah.
before.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
She just kind of looked at and she's like, with postpartum depression, I'm like, well, maybe I won't get it. I had every single risk factor for it.
Mhm.
It was a not if, but when and how severe. So she
Mhm.
wanted to keep on top of that.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So as we wrap up, is there a favorite memory you have of breastfeeding
Oh gosh.
or a favorite feeling?
I think probably one of my favorite memories is of the time that I had to get blood drawn for the BRCA analysis, and Gianna wanted to feed. So I have her in one arm, she's nursing, and then I'm giving my other arm to
Mm.
the doctor so they could draw blood. And I'm
Mm.
like, nursing while getting a blood sample taken. I never thought this was going to happen. It was a places we also went to a nurse in, so that was fun.
Oh.
I sat
Uh-huh.
down when she was about 7 months old. There was a woman at a Friendlies, who was nursing and was asked to leave.
Oh, wow.
So a bunch of us descended on friendlies and had a nurse in.
Wow.
And we stayed out on the sidewalk, and she was hungry. So I sat down and started nursing her. And other people are like, we should all do that. We should have a picture of all of us just sitting on the sidewalk nursing to normalize breastfeeding. And I'm there like, dude, my kid was hungry.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with
Oh, thank
me.
you for having me.
I told you this was a good one. Do you know someone who has suffered from severe mastitis or an abscess? Share this story with them. Do you know someone who felt dismissed by a care provider when they brought up concerns regarding milk making during the postpartum period? Share this story with them. Perhaps you know someone who produces way more on one side than the other and is feeling concerned. Share this story with them. It is by sharing these experiences that we feel less alone and more empowered to make decisions that feel like the best ones for us. If you've had an experience like any one of these, I would love for you to join my Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook to share about it. See you there.